Thanks for everyone for coming. Claremont Graduate University is extremely excited to have artist Judy Pfaff here with us this week. Judy, all the students have just been saying great things about their meetings and their talks with you. We're so lucky to have such a generous, warm, and wise artist among us. So, Judy was born in London. She received her BFA from Washington University, St. Louis, and her MFA from Yale. Some of the awards that she received include the MacArthur Fellowship Genius Award, the Barnett Anna Lee Newman Foundation Award, 2 National Endowments for the Arts, and a Guggenheim Fellowship. Her most recent exhibition was at Ameringer McHenry Yohe this past fall in New York, and her work is included in collections at the Museum of Modern Art New York, the Brooklyn Museum of Art, and the Whitney Museum of American Art. She currently co-chairs the Studio Arts program at Bard College and lives and works in Kingston and Tivoli, New York. Please give a warm welcome to Judy Pfaff.
Wish me luck. Thank you. It's been really nice being here. I used to teach at Cal Arts, and I think I was unconscious when I was there. It was a certain time, and I think I learned a lot there, but it was like pulling teeth. Can we have the lights super low? Thank you. And this is actually a very pretty ceiling. Okay, excellent.
Excellent.
A little bit, because I can't even find arrows here. Okay, here. When I went to Yale, I was a painter, and my teacher was a man named Al Held, and I don't know if you know his work. He makes monumental, complex, kind of crazy paintings, most of which were 20, 30 feet long. The ones he enjoyed painting were that big. He didn't go to high school, so when I was a painter, I had to listen to a lot of guys. They were all male teachers, and they would always sort of say things like, have you looked at Matisse lately, or Piero da Francesca, or something. So everything felt like you couldn't get there from here, you know. So as soon as 2 months after I arrived at Yale, I never made another painting. There were things going on in the city that was crazy about the dancers in the city, like Trisha Brown, Dawn Rayner, people like even Richard Serra, who is married. There was a lot of different kinds of work which intrigued me that wasn't painting. So materials became where I spent my time and trying to develop a language for sculpture, and I called it sculpture. Now you have to understand, this is New York City, Soho, 1973, and I had 13 puppies. So, and I was working full time. So I would come home, and obviously this is one state, and there every day would be a new composition. But I was trying to sort of see how things work, like on the floor, on the wall, up, down, kind of mini compositions, you know. And there were ideas, I guess, but they certainly are not interesting enough to tell you about. But I think it was really just to kind of get rid of a lot of the academic things that I was inundated with. I also decided that color was cool, even though all the good work was in black and white. I also thought that transparency was even more interesting than opacity. I thought that randomness was more interesting than being there and having it. And something about kind of a walk-through is what I really wanted. These are just little shots. The studio I had is up there. That was Richard Serra's studio, and I thought if I made a whole batch of work in aluminum foil, it would make him sick. He didn't care, but it was an exorcism, you know. And also, aluminum foil is so cheap, it sort of was cheap. I could make things, and again, it was really about evolving a vocabulary, imagery. There are funny things like, oh. There are funny things that I think are funny anyway. Philippe Petit lived in the neighborhood, and there were lots of, the Big Apple Circus was outside my window. And some of these things, if you pick them up, the weight was eccentric in them because they were formed from pounding aluminum foil. So if you pick them up, they tended to roll away or fall down. So there was something about balancing and a little bit of humor and simple and open structures and having things. This was actually in Cal Arts. These are all paper balls. So every time the door opened, they would just roll around. So I don't know if you can tell, but I'm trying to just open up this language. This is my first kind of legit show. This was at, what was it called? Lace, Los Angeles Contemporary or Continuing Exhibition, something like that. And Jill Gigerich ran that place. She's a very wonderful artist. She was my student at Cal Arts. She gave me this show. So this show was, I'm 30 years old, nothing is going right, I'm falling in love and out of love pretty fast, I'm getting married, I'm getting unmarried. Anyway, I decided to give everybody in my life a form and a kind of my sense of them. This jig-jaggy fellow here was a portrait of Mike Kelly, who was a student at the time. I miss him. Let me go back. I just jumped again. This fellow was Richard Archfager, who was teaching with me. I was teaching with him. And he's so opaque and so gothic and so bright. And he thought it was a portrait of me dealing with him than a portrait of him. That's how smart he was. Anyway, so I think you can tell this was all one piece. I was also, because I had never taken a sculpture class, I needed to learn how to make things. So Joe Lewis in the Wonder Shop at Cal Arts gave me carte blanche with learning how to do TIG welding and MIG stuff and, you know, basic woodworking things. It was called Prototypes. At this point, I got some money. I got a grant. I spent it all on plastic, which I love. I'm sorry that it's not environmentally sound, but it does things, you know. And this was a continuation of that language. Now I think it's involving, there are actually images of religious figures, and do you see Mike Kelly up there? He's Kelly Green. See, so there's like references there. So there were little tiny narratives within this whole thing. The space is 100 feet long, 50 feet wide. It's quite big, and it's held together by sticks, literally. This was my breakthrough show. It was Irving Sandler put it together. It was at the Neuberger Museum, and it was all the people who began, who showed at Artist Space. And that was Irving Sandler's baby. It was the first alternative space. So this was 6 years after I'd shown there. So I think this is about 1979. And in this show were fantastic artists like Ree Morton, Scott Burton, both dead, Jonathan Borofsky, Thomas Lanigan Schmidt, interesting Laurie Anderson. So it was kind of my introduction to this, the New York art world, really. This is a little bit later. This is MIT. We're going to move fast now. I stopped making those figures because they kind of started giving me the willies, because I knew who everybody was. If they lost a head or an arm, I don't know. I never played with dolls. I kind of personify things way too much. It just made me nervous, and I kind of didn't want that anymore. So I was in Houston, Texas with, this was a show with Robert Longo and, you know, Linda Benglis and Jennifer Bartlett. I think Robert called it 3 chicks and 1 dude or something like that. Anyway, this is in Texas. And I stopped doing the figures almost immediately. I didn't know what to replace it with. This show was called Charms. My husband had been a physicist, and I liked the kind of thing about atomic, charms like quarks. And so it was a kind of bouncy, and it didn't involve people, it involved like energy, yeah? This is my studio in Brooklyn, Greenpoint, 1979. What happened after doing that show in Houston, Houston was $50 away from the Yucatan. So I took a plane, I tried to learn how to swim. I don't know, I was so in love with this thing about color. I've been fierce with color because I just think New York is like one of these places that just doesn't give it credit, or just seems that they think it's cheap, or explosion and glitter factory, or has no content. It sort of is. And I thought it had all these ideas in it. It could be buoyant and transparent and have life in it, and it didn't have to be possessed, and it gave more off, and you didn't have to give in, it gave off. And so this was my studio. Ooh, that's out of focus. I don't think I can fix it. This was my first big show at Holly Solomon Gallery. It was called Deepwater. And I'm so sorry it's out of focus, but what I wanted was when you walked in, it felt like you were going down instead of across. There was something about a real immersion and this sensation of being in something, not looking at it. Ooh, are all of these going to be out of focus? They're in focus here and out of focus here. Is there anything I can do? Anybody smart with this stuff? Anyway, I hope it goes away. This was, so I started, I guess, doing these things which are called installations. I have a very fixed idea about what that is. It means it exists once. It really is of that space, in that space. I build a lot of it there. And usually I am thinking about something. The deep water thing was really in relation to going to the Yucatan. This was, I'm driving in, this is in Washington, D.C., in the Smithsonian, in the Hirshhorn, sorry, and I lost half the work on the back of my truck. And I got there and I saw this movie, Kagemusha by Kurosawa, and I decided that everything would be Oriental and have a kind of pageantry. So the color had this totally influenced by this late night movie being completely freaked out. This is in the Whitney Museum, 81. It's called Dragon. About 3 or 4 months have gone by. All that wood I'm just burning because we had no heat in the studio. And I think because I'm English, I just wanted to have something that felt like things were, the Whitney is kind of a daunting place, and it was actually a solid union place at the time. So I had to kind of sneak in at 2 o'clock in the morning and let me do this, because you weren't allowed to put in a light bulb or touch the walls or do the painting. And since it was installed, it just had to be me doing it. So I sort of learned a little bit about institutions. This was called Dragon. And there were 2 very distinct images. There was like a right-hand, left-hand orientation. One was, I think this is cropping. Yeah, the things are being really cropped. Something's happening. It's okay. It's all right. Anyway, so it wasn't dense like this. There was really lots of space. And so it's very hard. The slides will compress everything. This thing, this space word, is like my mantra. So as claustrophobic as it looks, it actually wasn't. This is getting a little bit later. I think you can tell there's a darkening. This was called Rorschach. It was in a very strange institution in Sarasota, the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art. This is in Massachusetts. This is actually kind of funny. It's not funny, but for me it was funny. For some reason, I was going to Amherst. I get the name Amherst. And for some reason, I thought it was in Vermont. So I had this fantasy of meeting all the woodsmen. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to Amherst. it's really like, it's like this place. There are only professors walking around. None of them knew how to use chainsaws or cut down trees, which is what I really wanted to learn. So I actually had to go to the lumberyard and got this huge piece of wood. And by the time I finished with it, it was in splinters and shards like this. And I think this is the funny part. The fellow on the outside of the gallery, the other gallery, was Richard Nonis, and he's a minimalist. He bought the same piece of wood and did nothing. And it looked good, it looked good. But anyway, so I was just sort of this, yeah, anyway. What I liked about this piece? No, I didn't like much of anything about this piece. It was really, this was claustrophobic. You were in a closet. The ceiling was 8 feet tall, it was 10 feet wide and 80 feet long. And it was called boa, you know, boa like in boa constrictor. But I had these tubes, and when you walked by, if you were breathing, which hopefully you were, the sound would come back, it echoed, it did something. So there was something about being inside this kind of really congested space. And I kind of felt for the first time more like a sculptor than a kind of decorator. It felt legit, and I think it was probably the weight of the material more than anything else. This is in the Venice Biennale, 81, 82, I don't know, somewhere in the 80s. Because I was going to Italy, I wanted to do something very Italian. I thought it looked like the Italian futurists. This thing about sound got into my head. I found all these organ pipes, and because it's Italy, I thought just paint the ceiling. You know, Michelangelo did that. It seemed to be a good idea. But you have to understand, we had no electricity. There was no toilet. There was no light. There was nothing. Those windows there, I put those in. You know. Anyway, it's fun being in Italy, but being in the Giudecca, in the kind of it wasn't in the where the real Biennale is. It's these kind of younger, more experimental, I think, parts of the show. But anyway, and the fellow next door to me was Michael Tracy. I don't know if anybody knows. He was this teacher of Julian Schnabel, and he was such a good drinker, and he could speak Italian, so we got through the day. This was called Either War. Actually, there were 2 wars, and being in Italy, everything's kind of, you know, the vaporettos don't run, you know, you move from, everything is kind of, it's like if, I realized that Fellini was not inventing anything. He just documented life in Italy as far as I could see. So there was a kind of raucous craziness there. And the one thing that gets me through these things, because I, you know, literally, the work didn't come, you're there by yourself, you're trying to sort of figure out what you're going to do. They found the David Sallies in the Polish pavilion the day before the opening. I mean, it's like very chaotic. And my grandmother was in the RAF, and she had a whole crew of women that sewed these dirigibles, these big blimps that were over London. So when I was a kid, she would tell me about noises overhead. Like, this frightening thing is when a plane would explode, because they couldn't see these things, they were silver. And the most frightening thing is to know that a plane had just exploded and all this stuff was going to fall on you. So I just kind of, that was part of the thing with the noise, to make it Italian, to make it, but also to make it for myself. For me, doing these pieces, you're just out there making this stuff up as you go along, and I think you need an anchor. So with every one of these, I had my own story. Yeah, that's in Italy working. This is in Germany. This show, strange enough, was called Westkunst, Western Art, 1935 to 1981 or 2, whatever. There were no women in the historical section. Zip. and they had reproduced Kurt Schwitter's first show. Joseph Beuys was in his glory. Richard Serra was throwing lead. David Hockney had all of his stuff. Klaus Oldham. There's not one woman, not a one. So anyway, that was the first time it dawned on me, oh, I've never had a woman teacher. I was the only woman in my class at Yale. And in this corridor of these young artists, of which I was at that time one, there was not Barbara Kruger, but another woman who was doing a collaboration. So there were two. And this was a historical survey, yeah? These are the drawings. This is all glitter stuff. People just hated this. I thought it was deluxe, and I thought it looked like a lot of television screens, because it's that refraction grating. That was about a 16-foot drawing, so about that size. This is a little bit later. This is at the Albright Knox. Maybe you can see it's getting more complicated. There's a little bit more geometry. It was called rock, paper, scissors. So I thought 3 very distinct languages. Now I can't even tell you what I thought those were. But this room had been called, it was the Clifford Still room. So what started me off on this was giving it sort of back to Clifford Still, some of his orientation of the color and the patchiness of the color. But also that museum has one of the best American abstract expressionist collection on the planet. So it really was an homage also to that collection. This is a little bit later. This is in my gallery, Holly Solomon, who I miss terribly. She's the only dealer I ever had who wanted me to do more, not less. And she was so crazy, a little bit crazy, and loved street people and young people and poets and, you know, the whole spectrum of sort of New York City. And after this show, well, this was the show, that's right. This is the first time I've ever done an installation in the same place. So that one that was called Deep Water in the beginning, this is the same place. You're looking through 80 feet of space. So I'm sorry it looks like 10 feet, but you're gonna have to like pop it out a bit. This was everything I knew, you know? I mean, this is like, okay, this is it. This is like opening a book, an encyclopedia of moves and materials and references. If you walk through it, they're actually hidden, not hidden, but you could read it more than just a photo could show you. This is me working in Japan. This is actually, I have a funny story. I'll be fast. The fellow, his name was Tsukamoto-san. He was the president of WACOL. He was a lot like Donald Trump, yeah? So he found me this place, which is over here, which I worked in to make the parts for the piece. And it had been an old auto body shop. By the time I left here, I was here about a month or two, the codes, the building codes in the city had changed. He made $2 billion because he was going to sell this space and he didn't sell this space. But when he did sell this space, it was zoned so he could build a giant apartment building on it, right? So he thought I was a lucky charm. So I was treated so well. So this is the piece. It was in Aoyama in a building made by Maki, pretty great Japanese architect. It looked quite like the Guggenheim space. Actually, it's this piece of, I found all these signs, and I thought it was a real homage to the city of Tokyo. It freaked everybody out, but other than that. There are things that say water, kawa, and one thing that says flat, and one thing that says mountain or tree or river. But I didn't know, but everybody who helped me was named like Kawanishi, which is like east of river. So their names were in this piece from these pieces of signs that I found. And I thought it was like a giant Japanese woodcut, a giant Japanese kind of ikebana, school of something or other. And, you know, I was just in love being there. And the person who was taking care of me was he was like a gangster. He was, so that's looking down. It went up about 30 or 40 feet high, this part of it. What I liked about it is I was clean and it was clean. This is the cleanest piece I've ever made. And I don't know, it just looked real good to me. I don't know. And by the way, I never knew how much they paid for everything. I was put up, I had 2 assistants with me. We ate sushi every night. I don't know, it was like so deluxe, so there. When I came back, I was in my car driving home, and there was, believe it or not, a wok store going out of business on 13th Street. And I bought every wok. He made all the woks spun out of steel, all the woks for Chinatown. And so they had blanks, circle blanks, and these forms, which were spun metal. So my gallery had moved uptown. This is Holly Solomon. She moved up to this place. It was ridiculous, like stupid ceilings and really little, and on the 5th floor with an elevator that could only have a passenger in it. So I decided to make still lifes instead of big landscapes, and it was called Apples and Oranges. I also have this thing that artwork should be more generous. I mean, New York is so stingy. You have to think all the time. You have to be like all cautious and thoughtful. So this was Supermercado. I think there were memories of Merida, which was my favorite town in Mexico. It was really just food and places. And a little later, I think this is being real American. This is my like Stuart Davis or something. It's like, I don't know. I just got kind of, I moved to Brooklyn. That's what happened. I was in Greenpoint, but I really moved to Williamsburg. And Williamsburg, I don't know, just it dawned on me that everything, there was no neon. It was all these kind of simple signs and kind of graphics and on all these streets like Graham Avenue. On the other side, this was a John Weber gallery. On the other side, the identical space was a Saul LeWitt with all these circles. So I've said this a million times. It looked like we both were given the same homework, you know, only I kind of got lost somewhere with the interpretation. But so that was nice. I got to meet him, who was a great guy. This is in the Whitney Biennial. This is the end of my career. Truly, I can't even, that isn't even, it's sad. It was really sad. So this is the late 80s, right? This is Jeff Koons. This is, I forget who it is. I'll remember later. There was Barbara Kruger with a big 17-foot painting of a monkey screaming, "I shop, therefore I am." And I'm like giddy with structures, you know, like, it was so off-key for the cynical late 80s, the era of Metro Pictures, and, you know, and it's not like conceptual art or cynicism hasn't been around for a very long time, but it ruled. It still rules, I think, anyway. This is my studio. I'm reconstructing a lot of the early works. Ooh, out of focus, sorry. I started, I gave up color for a while. It was called Horovacui. Then I came back again, the color. This one was called Warm and Tender Love. I don't know if you know Percy Sledge. He's like so good. So there was something about kind of gospel-y singing in Williamsburg. A lot of the churches were really in garages and stuff. So instead of stained glass, they would have, you know, contact paper stained glass. So there was something about trying to get a little euphoric and ecstatic, but kind of pedestrian at the same time. these structures began to really fascinate me. I think everything became like an exoskeleton, so that what's out front wasn't as interesting to me as how it got there. I was also working at Pilchuck, so the things about breath and air and, again, transparencies and movement. And this one was called Planetary Time. Planetary Time. Man, that looks good. Does that look good to you too? Is that clearer? Like, I don't know why. I don't know. I don't get it. This was called Barcelona. My favorite is Gaudí, so occasionally I'll do that. Like, well, not occasionally, a lot. An homage. Yeah, a lot of these things are being cropped. I'm sorry. It's called Straw and Gold. All these bed springs were from the neighborhood side lot in Williamsburg then. Now it's the Lux neighborhoods. Everything was burning. So I decided it just was so sad, and I thought, I can fix that. I can fix that. Milagro. My best friend next door was Milagro with 6 children. Yeah, everything's cropped, sorry. This is my studio in Brooklyn. This is a piece with, I hope you know of her. Her name is Ursula von Riddingsvaar. She is my very best friend. She works in one material, which is cedar, one method of cutting, which is with circular saws. She's very serious and very tall and is formal and thinks about family, and she's, you know, and we're like Mutt and Jeff. I mean, you couldn't have two more, and she doesn't watch television, and she doesn't know who Michael Jackson is or was. I mean, so I love her because we used to drink the best vodka, and we were in this, you know, fucked up co-op in New York, so we would just get drunk in order to get through meetings. But anyway, she's a great artist, but because I got to work with her on that cedar, and I was going to Washington State at Pilchuck, that's the land of cedar. So I'd call her and I'd say, Ursula, boy, do they have cedar. They have cedar shakes, they have cedar stumps, they have cedar law. She only gets 2x4s or 4x4s of cedar, so I couldn't entreat her at all. But I got hooked with this stuff and these forms. This is at Art Center. You can't see what it is, but it was there. And this is a kind of a little survey show of old work, some new work. And I'm pushing the wrong button. These are prints and drawings. Rooftop in Denver. I can't tell you the story, it's too sad. Exit art. I don't know if you know about exit art. It doesn't exist anymore, but Jeanette Ingberman and Papo Colo were probably the 2 finest curators in New York City. I don't think anyone really knew that. They were radical beyond belief, very political, very cool, did their homework. Anyway, this was a show, a group show. This is my part in it. The show was called Garden of Earthly Delights, taking off of Bosch's painting. What is happening, I think, here is this thing about these, I think everything was getting very viscous, you know, very kind of nasty. There's a lot of tar, there's a lot of fiberglass resins. It's certainly looser. And I think a lot from this sort of burning a lot of things, there was a nastiness. I think of it as nasty, body nasty. I'm sorry, I have so many photos, I'm so sorry. Oh, that's my beautiful studio.
What are these materials?
Sorry?
What are these materials that you're using?
Glass, cedar, glass, fiberglass, resin, tar, rope, heater. It's beautiful. That's my kitchen. It was really great looking. I mean, I don't know. I always like that. I like that. But this, if I get near this material, I get sick as a dog now. I really blew it. I sort of just toxic. But what it does, what this material does for me so fast it was like I can't tell you how much I love that.
What material are you talking about?
Fiberglass resin.
Oh, okay.
These are the drawings from about that time. They're quite big. That was the art center. Those are the drawings outside the show. This is my drawing studio in Brooklyn. This is my drawing studio upstate. This is my friend. She still is my friend, even though we had to do terrible things like do framing. Don't do framing, it'll kill you. Brandeis. Show is called Elephant. It was 90% resin. It went down 2 floors, poured down. What I liked about this piece particularly, it was in Columbus, Ohio, and I had taught at Columbus, Ohio in 1973. And all I remember is being frozen in Columbus. And so I just took out the ceiling. I think inadvertently I lowered the temperature of the whole place like 10 degrees. So instead of, I made everybody cold. Anyway, so this, again, you can see a lot of resins. It's very viscous. This is like really snarly and, but it had I thought the blue light coming in, it was really like the day, the month, the winter, Columbus. It just felt like it accurately got to some sensation that I remembered. Now I'm living on the river upstate. I'm losing my mind. It's so quiet. It's as zenny as I get. And, I don't know, it was a wonderful sort of I'm in a gallery on 5th Avenue and 57th Street and walking all this material up 5, 7 flights of stairs in a painting gallery, in a very old fuddy-duddy painting gallery of Andre Emmerich, who was a good friend. But it was a real blue chip gallery. He sold the gallery to Sotheby's about 3 months later. So I'm not sure this was good for him as it was for me. All these trees, by the way, were fallen in a storm upstate. I'm now teaching at Bard College. This was, I represented the United States in a Sao Paulo Biennale, and what you're looking at is actually a footprint of a couple of the churches that were there. So it was called Crown of Thorns, and there was a second story to it. I really fell in love with Brazil, not just Brazil, like the life of Brazil, of Sao Paulo. And this was an industrial space, hundreds of people coming in from all over the universe, great, great art from Europe being brought in on different levels. So it was like, and I was there for 2 or 3 months, so I got to meet everybody and live with a lot of the artists and the work. This is an odd duck. I was in where was it? Dartmouth, New Hampshire. And I don't know, I was not going to do another installation. I'd had it. I only had 10 days left. And then they showed me this gallery, and it was shaped like a fish. I don't know, it had like concave and convex walls. And I just thought it was the weirdest, coolest gallery I'd ever seen. It's like, fuck, I have to do this now. And I made these sweep molds, and I don't know, it was lunar. It was like, I don't know, so optical and so weird, and kind of had a kind of nice sound in it. And I don't know, I've been at war with like all the color, I like all the crazy color people like Madame Blavatsky and you know, weirder sort of things. So it was sort of like this thing about having kind of spiritual color, spiritual sensations with light and color and kind of eyeballs. It felt like your head was divided in half, and I don't know, something about the eye. This was right after 9/11. I was doing a show in Savannah, I think it's in October 2001. And I got all nostalgic, so I just decided that things had to be repaired. So I started doing things involved with restoration. So I took molds off of a lot of the old places in Savannah. So it was called the Squares of Savannah, which is how Savannah is organized. That was, I mean, I am certainly not political, and I don't think any, you know, I don't know what anybody knew, but I had a feeling, because I made kind of classical domes and classical moldings and these kind of rooms and how you circumambulated everything, that I thought there would be something about loss and history and rebuilding. This was at the, I don't know, the Elvium. It used to be called the Elvium. In the middle of winter, I decided that Madison, Wisconsin needed a lot of plants and something to look at. So it sort of had a kind of more philosophical feel. It had a lot of staircases. It was like a 70s building. So I added even more staircases everywhere. And this is based on a pilgrimage thing. And like Gaudi, these are lead balls. So if you move that, this whole spire would move. So it really was very floaty, and you know, a lot of architecture, but no architecture. It was the transparency of this architecture and the looseness of it was about the one thing that I liked very much. So these are details of that show. This is a show of drawings in Japan. Ho. These are prints that I make in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm always going there. It's like my home away from home. These things, the drawings and the prints, are what sell. I have never sold an installation. They don't exist. I've done hundreds of them. The sculpture, most of them I still have. I have not figured out the market, so when they give me grants, I just spend it like crazy. This is the first block of prints I did with them. And everything is truncated, you know, so I'm sorry what happened to the... This is my gallery upstate. This is an anthology of architectural motifs. A column from a Buddhist temple, Islamic grids, pagan plain, a moon gate, some post and lintel stuff. It really is, what prompted this is, one, I bought a house and I had to fix it up. I have an old Victorian house. But it was really this space, all my galleries, they're not cool like Gagosian or Pace. They're like, have rooms, and I hate that. And this place had molding, but it had beautiful windows and beautiful light. So a little bit of this stuff is predicated by where it's going. This is a stage set for an opera in Frank Gehry's building on the Bard campus. That's when it's lit. It was a Victorian play, opera, right, called Regina. That's my dog, Willie. This is a moment, I don't know if you've seen the Art 21 thing, but my friend and my mother and friends started dying, and I was freaked out, frozen, and I sort of did this thing really with a lot of light bulbs and a lot of dark light in it. And it was the most specific piece I've ever done, and probably the most moody. What you're looking at is lots of roots and black aluminum foil, soot like you can't believe. And this is a gallery that has Hoffman's in the back room, and the air ducts are going through. It's on 57th Street. There are reasons why they don't look forward to me working there. But when you came off the elevator, that's what you saw. And it had a nice way of moving the light around and the dark around. This is my studio upstate. I'm turning these forms. This was the show. It was at Houston, Texas Rice Gallery. Great, great gallery. They only do installations, and they invite wonderful people, architects and musicians and lots of people to do projects there, and they take care of you. This is my assistant, Jamie, who is a rock climber, and he'll only work on pieces where he can climb. So, yeah. Studio in Brooklyn. Prince. Drawings. Dog Willie drawings. A lot of this cut paper stuff came from, I did a lot of prints, and there were lots of drops from making the prints. And so it really gave me this huge inventory of ready-mades, all these papers. That's what they look like when they get cleaned up. And in a gallery, that's my gallery, was my gallery. These are 8 feet by 8 feet. Studio. At this point, probably from now on, I don't have an assistant installing or making frames, but I'm working alone. Maybe for the last 4 years, I've been working and the stuff is made of paper, so it's not difficult. But it felt so nice to just not have to communicate. I also, with this place that I have upstate, I have a lot of land, and half of this stuff is just I dig up, or it dies on my property. This is 2 years ago at Emringer McHenry Yohe. We're getting down to the wire. I'm falling asleep myself. I don't know if you can tell, but I love lanterns and Chinese anything. Now it's Chinese, it's not Japanese anymore. This is the new work, and I don't know if you can tell, but there are light bulbs and everything. I am now completely crazy for light bulbs. And I think that's because I get really upset going into galleries because they have terrible lighting and you're always stuck with, I don't know. So I've put it in there. It's also, I think it's Eastern to have light coming from inside, or the illusion of it, but this is actual. So it really has its own like heartbeat or something. And light doesn't go into the camera so well, it blurs, but there are things about it that are really cool if you're there, I think. This is a show in Denver, it's just still up. This just came down. My gallery in Chelsea was flooded, so my show was cut 2 weeks short. I think this looks real Indian. I just came back from India. So. That's my place. That's my place. That was my crew 2 summers ago. All we did is dig holes. Oh, that was a little movie from India. Anyway, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions?
Of course, do you? You know the form that you have that is installed in Omringer?
Yeah.
Like you talk about them on your Archman one. How do you make those and the turning ones too?
I've made them different ways, but it started, there was a book that I found from the WPA, and it was for teaching people to do plasterwork, and it was from that era. So those are called sweet molds. When you see medallions under the chandeliers in old houses, so there's a template. You have a post, you pour the live plaster, and you start moving it around. And you keep adding it. It starts heating up, and it adds, and it takes the form like butter, like plaster, like it's perfect. It's really, really beautiful. When you start getting some of those discs are 20 feet in diameter, they're quite big. You are putting in thousands of pounds of plaster, and when that stuff starts getting hot, it is like you can feel it. You're on top. I mean, it's really giving off a lot of heat. But it's called a sweep mold. So, but I've cheated a little bit, so I might stack up styrofoam and then just have it fill in between. But you're like what is that image, like a carrot in front of a horse? You're just walking this template around in a circle until, and people are, you know, it's like medieval. It's like a bucket brigade or something. I'm supposed to give you this. You know, you're running it through, and you start seeing it form up. It's like amazing. It's really a beautiful technique. And I think I use it when I've done them, you can't tell, but you know, like Anish Kapoor's forms. Some of them go in, some of them go out. He's like the world's most elegant dude, but these are a little funkier, and they have more architectural reference, I think. But it's a form that I can't get enough of. I think it just seems, you just slide off of them. They just seem iconic. Plus, they're usually this, so the negative space creates the sphere. I don't know if you can see that in the images, but that's what I think it feels like. As you're walking in the kind of bubble. Johnny. You're the only one that remembers the name. So I'm going to say it.
My question is, your installations, did you use a lot of the same materials?
No. No, strangely not. Sometimes, once in a while, I find it's like, you know, we were talking about cars today. It's like, you know, imagine finding a fender of a VW and putting it on a Mercedes. They're still fenders. They still function the same. They still have sort of the same form, but the scale is wrong. It's never going to fit. It used to piss me off because it's like, I have all this stuff, and I can use the stuff which is architectural. Like if it's a piece of 2x2, you know, mechanical tubing, it can get cut up, but it's not an image. It's just a material, you know, neutral. It's neutral. It's neutral. I can use it. It's not neutral. I can't use it. Which is not history.
Reed, what's it I'm
trying to.
Oh,
glasses like this anymore.
What would you consider one of your greatest challenges with making your work, or
Staying
maybe the
alive.
process?
Staying alive.
Side.
There were times when literally, when I was doing those figures, I was working so much. I was trying to take care of building a studio, feeding my dogs, you know, all the Australians which would come through my place and need a place to crash. I mean, you have no idea the kind of my loose life. Was sort of keeping it together, and that has always. Now I have a very deluxe life because of the teaching then that seems easy to me. So I don't worry, I don't think about it. I don't have big ideas. You guys have to have big ideas because you're going to be challenged on what you're doing. No one asked me. But you know what, I'm going to tell them anyway. But if there was anything, it was like, I think things have to, I want work to give more. Give. Just, you know, and you don't have to like it, but there's something there. There's, you know that there's, like it or lump it, there's something about paying attention to how things die, grow, live, seasonal. You know, there's something about being alive, which I like, actually. And my dealer used to say, be careful where you take her, because I'm going to have to look at that imagery for the next year or two, you know, because it always like India, like that crumbly, you know, burnt plastics and beautiful and not beautiful. That's all India, I think, and I think they look more like mandalas for the first time, and so it's like I've never done kind of specific forms like that in quite a long time. I don't even know if I ever have. I like that I could get there now without thinking about it. It was just like, well, of course you can do this. It's very located and very iconic, easy image. No, I don't, yeah, it's mostly balancing, you know, I don't have family, so there's not a lot of that takes my time. Teaching takes a lot of time, but I really like it, so it's not so bad. I do complain, so. And Bard College for me is a very good place. So finding Bard and being upstate and having the space, and building the space to make this work and take care of this work, taking care of this work is very important for me now. I kind of really feel like I have grown up a lot in the last few years with being able to take care of myself and the work with them.
Hi, I know we talked about light. I don't remember, but
Yeah, I do. Light bulbs. I like light
Yes.
bulbs.
I do too. I love them. I'm curious what made you decide to use light now after all these years.
You know, there's always been light in the work. Actually, there always has been. And I never even realized it because the lights in the galleries were never where I needed them, so I was always dropping them, or a lot of them was little balls on the floor. Or I do like fluorescent lights, and I like all, you know, and I'm a shopper. So at Christmas, like everybody who comes to my house thinks I haven't taken down my Christmas lights. You know, and I just say, yeah, okay. They're always up. I need them. And when I go other places, I think people, you know, that's why you have stained glass windows in churches. That's why you have candles. I think we need it. I think it's like really important. And, you know, color, I think all of those things. And I think they're really not given their due, the importance, like what a human being needs to keep energized. I drive around here, it's like, oh, they've got Christmas lights up, and it's 80 degrees. It's so funny, but I think, I like that. Good, you know.
I love your work.
I didn't answer.
No, you did.
Awful.
I love your work anyway, especially the light pieces. They're amazing.
I like this new work. You know what I like is
It's very
I don't have to, you know, it's just mine. I don't know why that seems interesting.
Yeah. That's one more question. Yeah. How do you do it? Like your work is very complex and it's got a lot of pieces.
Yeah.
I know, and obviously they work. Do you get criticism for that, or how do you feel about the complexity?
If you're lucky, you get criticism.
Phrase that. But
You know, it used to be. I used to get a lot. I mean, there were probably 5 or 6 years when I would literally be at parties and the people who were not doing work like mine would like spill my drink on me or something really stupid, you know. I think they thought that my work was like the depth of real art or pure art. Or I think it looked, at the time, it's hard to see that now, at the time it looked extremely decadent. And like a disco, like lowbrow. And one, I like disco, so I didn't really quite understand why that dogma of the time. And I know that sort of probably having my background, I can hardly read, you know. And now I can say, oh, let me put my glasses on. It doesn't really help, but, and, you know, so visual things, I have a very good visual intelligence, but I think they thought that I was some stupid person. And, but that might have been also the color thing and the, you know, conceptual art has really dominated for quite a long time. I mean, when I was in the city, you know, that's the era of Smithson and Judd and, you know, Ryman and, you know, Sarah and there wasn't just manifestos. It was like they were very adamant about what could be sculpture, which sounded to me extremely evangelical or conservative or Republican. Is everybody a Republican? I knew I'd get into trouble, but you know, it seemed non-inclusive. It seemed really like, you know, and so I thought that I was being quite specific about how to turn that, how to add and be more inclusive, to use a stupid word. Hi.
Why did you give up color, and for how long did you give up
Color?
color?
Well, I do these things every once in a while, like, don't make any more figures. Don't use that. You know, I do that. It's like I wake up in the morning, it's like all of a sudden, it's like, don't do it anymore. I think going and hanging around glass blowers, and glass blowers, I don't know if you noticed, they're all beautiful. All the girls, all the boys are all beautiful and they're really nice. And they're, you know, and everyone's just blowing bubbles. And you're on some mountaintop and the wind is blowing. Color there didn't seem necessary in quite the same way. And I think in New York City, I think that's why when Mondrian was getting real esoteric and then he came to New York and he did Broadway Boogie Woogie, he had no choice. You have to figure that stuff out if you're in a place that's gyrating and busy in that way. Pilchuck is on a mountaintop where nothing happens, except it rains a lot. So color didn't seem necessary, and it seemed really, at the time, like breath. Like, and then I stopped that. Yeah. I get my fill. I learn what I need to learn with that, and then I try to move on. And it's not, I don't think about it that way. It's just that's what I realize happened. Also, the white pieces that was in the gallery with the tubes on them. I lived on the river, and it was in a tugboat factory. From my bedroom, the river was there. I mean, the tugboats used to come into the house. Is in the winter, I only to see like a tree moving down or a sturgeon or some icky thing coming out of the water or I don't know, like, yeah, you know, and I just thought, nothing happens here. When I went to the gallery, the relationship of 57th Street to the windows there was exactly the relationship of this river to my window. So I thought it was like, yeah, I can do that because and I'm making it up, you know, I'm just finding reasons to make the work make sense in the place. And I put holes everywhere so everybody could see out and see the river, the road, the avenue, the movement. So, yeah, but when I don't need color, I don't use it. And when I do, I do. Now I can't get enough of it. And I realize I have never really quite liked pink and purple. And now I kind of like it. And what's so great is everything in the universe now is pink and purple, so I can find plastics that are... So I think it's sort of funny, like I don't know if I'm following the way the world goes or, you know. And I also get pissed off if someone thinks I can only work in color, so I might do that to myself. Thank you. Oh, hello.
Did you always know you were an artist?
Because
because they put me in that room in the corner and gave me something to stay out of trouble. I didn't know it, they knew it, you know. So in a funny way, yes, but my teachers protected me. I've always had people who said, she's, irascible, she doesn't come to school on time, I don't know where she is, she put her shirt on backwards, but she can do this thing, keep her there. So I was always quite protected by teachers.
And did you ever think you wouldn't be an artist or you weren't an artist?
I wanted to be, if I ever wanted to be anything, I wanted to make landscapes for animals in zoos. That was my dream. When I went to St. Louis, I have a great suit, and the guy, there used to be this very famous guy who had a program every week. And you'd go there, and they would be feeding animals out of stainless steel dishes. And I thought that was so crazy. Like, could you just put it in a faux rock? Like real, So they did all this trompe-l'oeil everywhere, but other things they would forget. I want to be a zoo architect.
Hi, I was lucky enough to hear a lecture of yours like 20 years ago.
And I said exactly the same thing.
No, it was really great.
Oh,
And it was different, but there was overlap. And it was at Skowhegan, and I remember being so struck by how hard you work, and you talked in a way that stuck with me for many years about how hard it is to do these huge installations and how it took all your money, and how it was a huge thing. I remember thinking about how dedicated it was, and now I see it as you as a kind of a precursor to like artists like Jessica Stockholder or Katerina Gross or somebody like even Jason Rhodes, or and this whole era of younger artists selling colossal installations as an artwork, an artwork.
That's right.
And that for a while it was commonplace to sell these giant things as artworks. And I wondered what you thought about that, or did that open up the door, through the back, even though you sort of set the precedent, right? Like, did that sort of give way for the installations?
Jessica was my student, and I love her, and she's doing some of the best work of her life right now. She is, her family, she's from Vancouver, and I think her mom and dad are professors of literature. I don't even tell her to work, she's quite bright. She's really, so I think there's an elegance about her work and the kind of language that she uses and the kind of poetry that kind of gives it more credibility. And also I think, less than me, she sort of harkens to like Rauschenberg. I think there's a kind of formal, very fast visual acuity that she has. I can't tell you that I don't feel it, that I'm not aware of it, but I think it's age. I think I'm just so, I don't know how old Jessica is. She's probably 50-ish now. I'm 66. Sarah Z, who's like on a roll, in her 30s. And the work is valued.
But do museums now come to you? Because
No, never.
So
Never.
still this
Never.
impasse,
No.
because
By the way, I don't have a gallery in New York right now. I just, but no, I have not done the museum shows I've done were in the 80s, and that's quite a long time ago. So I have survived by doing university shows. I'm big in the southern universities. I know more about West Virginia. Can you believe it? And they're great. Walter Gropius has a museum in West Virginia. North Carolina. I don't know. They love me down there. suddenly get a show. When you get to be paid. So I'm just waiting my turn, you know.
That's all the time.
You've already done it.